Hi, this is Maggie from Tailspin Petworks, and this is What's Up Dog Training and Behavior Basics for Pet People Part 3 Training Skills. Training chops reduce frustration and increase success, both for the handler and the dog. Training skills are the skills you as a handler develop to increase your success with your pet. What you do is almost more important than anything else. If you want consistency, you too have to be consistent and understand the basics. So, what are you doing? Your body language matters when training. In the beginning, it should be as clear and clean as possible to convey what you want without extraneous movement because dogs notice movement first and they're context driven. So, if you're not clear, you're not going to get what you want. You need to practice your cueing and your delivery. The order of operations or mechanics is how you set up the reinforcers and such that the dog is clear that the behavior comes first and the reinforcer comes after. This makes it easier to fade reinforcement later and prevents the dog from staring at your pouch or hands. This is a big problem with a lot of pet owners. Dog becomes really good at predicting when you're going to do things because your hand is close to the pouch or close to the pocket, or you already have the food in your hand. And what happens is it distracts the dog from learning the actual behavior. So your mechanics matter. You say the cue, the dog does the behavior, you mark it, then you reach for the reinforcer, and then you reinforce the dog. So you want to make sure that that's clean. Otherwise, you'll have difficulty getting rid of all that food and stuff at the end. And then you have to decide what kind of reinforcers are you choosing. A lot depends on the dog. The dog chooses what is reinforcing or what is punishing. Usually, I prefer food to start. A lot of trainers do because it's easier to do multiple repetitions with small bits of awesomeness than it is to use a toy where you have to tug for several seconds, et cetera, et cetera. Affection, a lot of people will say, oh, my dog works for praise. That's not totally accurate. And most dogs really don't care about praise that much. They like it. Like, oh, I'm a good dog. Thanks. But I don't want to do that thing. It's not worth it. So you need to make sure that you're using something that is valuable enough to the dog that they will work for it, and that you are not competing with a cookie, like a piece of kibble, when there's a squirrel, that sort of thing. So you have to think about what you're going to use for reinforcers. Then you have to think about what you're going to do. What is it you want to train? Like if you're not just training a sit, for example, you're doing something a little bit more complicated. How are you going to get there? How are you going to tell the dog what it is you want? Are you going to use a lure? If so, what happens after that? We have to talk about the difficulty with putting together a plan when you're using lumping instead of splitting. So we're going to talk about that. Say you're training, pick up your toy and put it in a box. This is clear as to what you want to have happen because you know in your head what you want to happen, but is it clear to the dog? You put a toy on the floor, and then what? Dog's like, okay, there's a toy on the floor. What do I do? What you want is move towards the toy, grab it, hold it, drop it in the box, move the box, etc., make it harder. Dog doesn't know any of that stuff. They might move towards it because they like the toy. That's the only thing you're going to get to start. And what happens is you get decreased rate of reinforcement. Then you get frustration, and then you get a dog who just quits. And I can't blame them. They don't know what you want, and you're getting frustrated, and the dog is like, what? I don't know what to do. And what happens is they start to have signs of distraction. They run away, they sniff the ground, they scratch, they bark, they lay down, they give up, they walk around. They just don't want to play anymore. We need to make sure that they want to enjoy what they're doing. So we need to make sure that your rate of reinforcement's high enough. This is what will change things. How do you do that? You do it by splitting. So instead of lumping big pieces of behavior together, you are actually splitting it into little tiny pieces, making it easier for the dog to understand where you're going and for you to get the dog to push a little bit to the next one. So I've written down all of the little steps that we would probably have to use. Now, some dogs might skip a few. That's fine. But if you have a dog who doesn't know how to shape, has never played the game before, and doesn't know how to offer new things, they're not going to do well with the lumping one. They're going to do better with the splitting one. It helps the dog understand what you want. It increases your rate of reinforcement. You have less frustration. You're going to get there faster. And we talk about reward placement. So, for example, when I taught a dog how to pick up the toy and put the toy in a box, I had a hard time getting past the picking up, moving to the box, to the drop in the box. Like he'd drop it, but he never dropped it in the box. And I was like, well, what am I going to do with that? I don't understand. And then it came to me, oh, I'm going to reward in the box. So basically what would happen is he'd pick up the toy, hold it in his mouth. The box is right next to him. I would click, which means he's going to drop the toy. And then I would throw the cookie in the box. His head would turn and the toy would go in the box and he'd get the cookie out of the box. So that's called rewarding, where you want the dog to go. So we have to think about those things when we're shaping, because that can build or move a behavior forward if the dog is not getting it. We have to be creative. Reward placement can be rewarding in position, which is like dog sits. You reward them while they're still in the sit. You can reward further away when you're throwing a toy, or like in the bottom one there, you can tell them to go get the food out of the bowl. There's all sorts of reasons you would choose reward placements to get a behavior to move forward. Then we have to think about adjusting the environment as you're training. When making things harder, you have to be aware that you may still need to adjust to make things easier if your dog is in an environment that is too difficult to succeed in. This is kind of like another example of lumping, but in a different way. In the first example on the left, the man and his yellow Labrador, looks like, are in an area that is busy. There's a lot of people. There's other dogs. They're very close by. There's a tree. And of course, if there's a tree, there's probably pee on the tree and he'd want to go sniff it. So it's a very high distraction environment. And it's possible that the dog is just not ready to be in that environment yet to do the behavior that they're looking for. So what he does is he adjusts it. He goes somewhere farther away from the people, the tree, and the other dogs, and he finds a visual barrier to use so that his dog can do whatever the behavior is that they're working on. Then you gradually increase back into the higher distraction. And then there's proofing. The concept of proofing is ensuring the best that you can that your dog can successfully perform the trained skill in many different environments. You start easy, you gradually increase, and then you start moving around and you start changing things, and eventually the dog's like, oh, I get it. I do this thing everywhere. That's proofing. But how do you know if the dog really knows it? If he's not doing the behavior when you cue it, he doesn't know it. It's pretty simple. All these people say, but he knows it. It's like, no, sorry, you haven't proofed it enough if he's not doing it here. How do you know if they know it? When they can reliably do the behavior in many different places. When they only do the cue asked for and not a different one, which is called stimulus control, which means if I say sit, I get a sit, not a down, and vice versa. And when they respond quickly and easily to the cue. Once you get to the point where everything is proofed and looking really great, what do you do for maintenance? Well, we're going to start fading off the food, etc., and go to variable rates of reinforcement, things that we talked about in the previous videos. But reducing rate of reinforcement does not mean never reinforcing again, especially if you're dealing with behaviors that the dog would not do normally. Like a lot of the stuff we ask our dogs to do are not things that they would choose to do. So if the behavior is replacing something much more self-reinforcing for the dog, life rewards can help. So you can get off the food and you can start using other things. Go swim, go sniff, go play, go chase, go run, go roll. Let them have the things that they want in exchange for things that you ask them to do. Happy training.